Yeah, so this goes on from what Mamta was saying. This is the third part of how to make your supporter journeys really awesome. And a lot of it is what Mamta was just explaining with UN Women. It's about making it more than static. It's about going through that process of collecting data over multiple channels and personalizing the experience so that you're improving that supporter experience. And in order to do that, you need to be able to track performance and activity and behavior. You need to go through that test and iterate process. And then automation is also going to be your friend. And, you know, as we keep saying, it's about getting those goals. It's about achieving your goals by making it supporter centric. So if we look at this first example, if tracking is what allows us to give supporters more of what they've told us they like and where they like it. So exactly what we saw with UN Women, using something like a survey to then tailor EDM content. They have told you with that interactive interaction, they've told you what they like, and then you can give them more of that in an EDM. But it's also about using other data points, and everything. So much of what happens online, so much of what we do and what others do is trackable. So we can use that to our advantage. And so, you know, there are examples like if a supporter donates to a particular appeal, follow up on social with content from that same case study, because they've given you an indication that that story really speaks to them. They've reacted to that story. So then improve the experience for them by following up and showing them that you're paying attention and showing them content that you know they care about. Likewise, track EDM clicks and suggest related videos based on the page views or what they've clicked on an EDM, or check out what's working on Facebook in organic or paid, and then use that as a bit of a proving point. That creative is obviously effective, so then you can roll it out across your EDMs for other kinds of communications. Another example is using SMS to remind donors that they gave this time last year. So this is all about making sure you're collecting the data in a way that you can then personalize the experience. You know, we're not just talking about personalizing first name in the emails. It's about accruing a whole data set that you can then use to improve that supporter experience and personalize it with content, with channel, and time of day, all sorts of data points that let you make that experience far more effective and far more personal. But that can't be just tracking and collecting data, can't be the main decision point for you. You have to test so that you actually know what are the right decisions to make. And I think Mamta went through a lot of this with UN Women. But another example we have is here with Peter Mac and their recent tax appeal that we worked on. We tested different things with the messaging, tone, rational versus emotional, messaging in the voice of the case study versus in the director there, Peter Mac. And it's just important to reiterate that we're not just looking to improve the metrics. We're looking to learn about what our audiences prefer. And obviously, one of the big tests we did for tax was the channel, EDM, Facebook, SMS, and search. And then it's important. Then, obviously, with a testing plan, we all know testing is important. But it's worth saying that you get your test results and then you put them to use and you use them to then iterate on the experience and optimize the experience. And we did that with the messaging and the tone. But looking at the right-hand table there, we got some really interesting results on channel and what works well and what doesn't work well. And you can see, as we're saying, for Peter Mac at least, EDM is not dead. It is the clear driver of income online for Peter Mac, and that's not going anywhere. Second to that is people responding to the DM piece, but coming online as a response to that. But then we had page search that we threw in as a test. We weren't sure what would happen, and it went gangbusters. It exploded, and it was clear from the data that it was a support channel. It was supporting people to donate in the way they wanted to donate. But the first cue was an EDM or the DM piece. But then search provided this holistic experience where the paid search ad copy reflected what they were looking for. The landing page then reflected the messaging and the creative they'd seen rather than a generic landing page from an organic search page. So it all tied together, and the conversion rates were off the charts. So paid search proved itself as a viable and worthwhile step in that supporter journey. Similar with SMS, it's a smaller portion, but the ROI was good enough to prove SMS as another channel to keep using, to pick off those people who maybe weren't going to donate in any other way. So there was, there's a cohort in the data there for SMS of people who only donate that way. So you're picking them out. And then Facebook performed nowhere near as well as we expected it to. So we were running different tests on Facebook with different messaging, different audiences. None of them really worked. And so we need to rethink the role of Facebook in appeals. And I wonder if a lot of you are seeing that at the moment with warm appeals, seeing, lookalike audiences sort of, fluctuating for us. So it's about testing what we need to use Facebook for. It's not about, we can't take this test and throw Facebook out, but it's a question of how do we use that to improve the supporter journey and make sure that we're testing and tracking that performance so we can work that into a better supporter experience down the line. And the last note I'll make on this is automation. And this is really a nuts and bolts point, but you want to use automation platforms to make your life much, much easier, because they really will enable this kind of experience, supporter experience that we're talking about. Firstly, it allows you to automatically create that dynamic experience where content is personalized based on past experiences. You're seeing content personalized to you on different channels based on your activity. And this is a screenshot from Active Campaign. Someone has submitted a form. They flow through a journey where they get an email, and they're automatically added to a Facebook custom group where they start to see certain Facebook ads, and then they automatically get an SMS 7 days later. So that's easy. And what automation is therefore allowing you to do is integrate these different platforms, Facebook, SMS, email, and move the data around so that it all happens in the back end once you've set it up, as opposed to drowning in a sea of importing over here, exporting from here into that one. And we can never get entirely away from spreadsheets, but automation, a tool like this, Active Campaign or Autopilot or Zapier, or obviously there's many, many, many tools you can use, allow you to set this up and really do it at scale, because otherwise it would be impossible beyond a very small scale journey. So this is an important point though. You set up your automations, you run some tests, but it's not set and forget. You need to continually collect more and more information. And that allows you then to put that information to use. So collect the data and then optimize and personalize, constantly testing and automating and iterating as you go, and constantly improving that experience within an appeal for that cohort over 6 weeks or over 1 or 2 months or 1 or 2 years. You constantly improve on that supporter experience as you go. Which brings us to the ABC of how to get it done. And I'll pass back to Mamta.
Thanks, Dan. So that was a lot to take in, but we have kind of distilled it down to the ABC of 3 things that we think you could take away today to action some of these points and kind of shift your current journey, if you're not using it, into multi-channel. So A is our first point. So Dan, if you flip the slide.
Oh yeah, good one.
So harking back to the very, very first one, making it more than readable, is really taking the time, and you can do this afternoon if you have some time, is auditing your existing collateral. Take a look across your different channels, take stock of what content you have and what other types of content you use and where they live across your different channels and your devices and your platform. And you can just start building them into your current journey to increase the engagement and interaction. So there's 2 really easy ways you can do this. The first one is, or the first one, which is swapped around, and the second one is you could really just go out, look at your supporter journey and switch just the read more link and link to a YouTube video if you have it. You could link, if you're not doing watch video all the time, if you have a podcast, you could link it to a podcast. You could go to Spotify, you could go, if you browse it, somewhere else other than your website, you could click it there. You could push to a Facebook gallery if you have a Facebook gallery, or if you have a gallery somewhere else. If you have a resource page, you can push them to a resource page rather than just read more. The second thing you can do, which is a little bit more detailed, but it could be quite fun, is go through your Facebook or your Instagram posts or what your best performing channel is. Take a look at 3 or 4 of the highest performing organic posts, and build a custom list of your EDM, whichever one you want to target, whether it's current supporters, whether you're doing a fundraising event, whether you've got a appeal running at the moment, and schedule them over the next couple of days or weeks or months, and just boost them to see, what kind of engagement they get, if they actually are using that as well. So you can take some learnings from there. Now hand it back to Dan for B and C.
Great. So another thing you can do is build a survey, which, as we discussed, is a great way to learn more about your supporter and learn about their preferences. And you can write just a short survey with 3 questions, which is totally enough. And you can ask affirming questions that encourage your supporters to think about your cause and why it's important. Things like, do you agree that X and Y is important? What do you think is the most important out of these factors? And then you're learning more about them, but you're also getting them thinking about why your cause is important, keeping your cause top of mind, and making it a much more active experience for them, thinking about your mission rather than just sort of passively intaking information. So a survey is a great way to do that. Make sure you record the responses, even if you don't put them to use right now. You have that data. You can then personalize content for that cohort down the track, or you can start to collect that information and use it as a sort of sample size to tailor your content across other journeys and other appeals in the future. And then C is for create some assumptions. And this is about building a test plan. And it's really important to think about some assumptions that you're making, or some assumptions that you want to test. What don't you know about your participants, your supporters, your leads? And then make a test plan. So ask yourself 2 or 3 questions about what you want to know or what you want to learn about your supporters. And then what content do you have and what channels do you have available where you can test those assumptions, and test which channels and which combination of channels and creatives get the best results. And build that into something that's coming up. As Mamta said, you can do this as part of your Christmas campaign or your next event. And it doesn't have to be large scale. Just make sure you're recording the results so that then you can use those results and keep moving forward and keep improving that user experience to also kick your own goals. And so I'll pass back to Mamta.
Thanks, Dan. So we've come to the last slide, and we've got 10 minutes left for questions, which is great. So just to wrap up what we've talked about today, and like I've said, we can't cover everything which is multi-channel because it is very vast and very varied. But what we come down to at the end of the day is that making multi-channel journeys is important because it really does improve. It's very supporter-centric and improves the conversations that you can have and the relationships that you do have with your supporters. It's about talking to your supporters where and when they are, because they're not just on email anymore, they're across different channels. It's about making your journeys more engaging and interactive, not just informative and passive. It's really about giving more than just telling them stuff. It's about learning and sharing and starting conversations. And you know what? It doesn't have to be very time consuming. Like when you start thinking about multi-channels and all the different channels that you have, it can seem really daunting to go in and go, oh, I have to create a multi-channel journey. But, you can just make simple changes, like we showed you in the example, changing a click read more to a watch a video rather than or listen to a podcast. So you can leverage existing assets that you actually have and start testing and expanding across channels. And that doesn't mean every channel is going to work, because it's not. And it doesn't mean you should be on every single channel. As I said, that's not smart either. Multi-channel just doesn't mean shove everything everywhere. It's really about getting strategic and, think about it from your supporter point of view and asking where they are, what they're doing, and how we can talk to them better. And it's really important to keep it dynamic, because it isn't just a set and forget, as Dan mentioned. It is really about testing, automating, reiterating, and tracking your results. And this is a bit of a harder thing because we are really time poor and resource poor and, whatever else poor at the moment with certain things. But to do it well, you really need to keep it dynamic, because as the digital landscapes keeps evolving, something that worked, like we said with emails, the G client is not working as well as it used to, but doesn't mean Facebook is going to work as well as it used to. And we see that right now. So it's really about being dynamic, and rather than keeping it static, this is the journey over 2 years. It's really about, or like, you know, this is the journey we do in appeals, so we're going to do it again that year. Or this is the journey we do with fundraisers. It's really about learning and adapting and growing, which is the last point.